Coming up on Need to Know, mixing religion and politics can be a bit taboo, but religious issues can impact decisions in the voting booth. The relationship between religion and politics in this year's presidential election. That's next. Also on the show, she's a public defender by day and a soul singer by night. How Danielle Ponder is combining her law career and her powerhouse voice to empower, inspire, and even create change. It's all coming up right now on Need to Know. Polls find that most Americans want a president with strong religious beliefs. But to what degree does religion play a role in how voters vote? The key issues and talking points in a presidential election, and who wins the title of the next president of the United States? And what's being called one of the most polarizing election years? We're examining how religion could influence this year's presidential election. Joining me for this conversation is Rabbi Peter Stein, Senior Rabbi at Temple Beth Kodesh, the Reverend Imani O'Lear, Senior Pastor at Reformation Lutheran Church, Sarir Fazali, President of the Islamic Center of Rochester, and Father Brian Kuhl, Director of the Catholic Newman Community at the University of Rochester, and Chair of the Diocese of Rochester's Public Policy Committee. Welcome, and welcome back to Sarir and Imani. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
So our Constitution clearly states in the First Amendment this divide that's supposed to exist between religious life and functions of government. And Thomas Jefferson actually wrote, "Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions." However, the separation of church and state may not be as clean as Jefferson envisioned. So elements of religious themes, they constantly show up in politics, especially during presidential elections. And I want to get your take on why, or rather how this happens. Why does religion seem to always play a prominent role in elections? And I'm going to give this to you first, Sarir.
Well, I think people are looking to grasp onto something. They want people elected who are like them, and the whole issue of morality, whether you're a conservative or you're a liberal, they want to see people that they can identify or associate with. As a result, I think the politicians sometimes, they play off on that, whether they appeal to the pro-choice or pro-life groups or what have you. There is a need that we see in America to associate with something or someone, and we want that person or those people to represent us because they're like us.
So I actually would think about it in a little bit of the opposite way, which is not so much that people are looking for our elected leaders to have religious values, but our own religious values. So when I'm looking at candidates, when members of my community are looking at candidates for office, it's my religious values and the sacred teachings of my tradition that will influence the choices that I make when I cast a vote.
So should religion have a place in politics? And it's a big question. Ronald Lindsay, President and CEO for the Council of Inquiry, has said, and has argued, for democratic discourse to be successful, the participants in that discussion must be able to understand, evaluate, and debate reasons that others offer for their views. And it's not possible to do that if religious doctrine is offered as a justification for public policy. What's your take on that?
I think that's probably not representing well what religious people believe about their faith traditions. I think that most people, like you suggested, want in the public square, their values represented. A lot of people, almost 80% of Americans, believe in a God, have a faith tradition, or identify with a particular religious tradition. Those values form what we believe, what we hope for, what we ascribe to, what we desire for a healthy community.
But the idea that I think that what ends up happening is that we impose what we believe God is in our political figures, right? Anytime that God becomes anything opposite, for me, opposite of one that speaks to those that are held captive, those that are oppressed, those that do not have voice or that are vulnerable, then that becomes something counter what religion is supposed to be about, right? And that's when we start seeing that in people, that's what makes me nervous, I guess, in the whole thing.
For sure. I think the idea of vulnerability is really central in my religious understanding, that we're in this world to respond to those who are vulnerable, to work for the cause of justice and equality and peace. And when I look at elected leaders, I don't particularly care whether an elected leader is religious or not.
Right.
What I care is that they're taking actions that are helping those who are vulnerable, that are working to end racism and violence and suffering in our world. I'm not looking whether they have a religious perspective or not, but that what they're doing lines up with my religious perspective, since I am a religious leader.
We've seen in the Muslim community, Khizr Khan took on an extremely prominent role at the Democratic National Convention, not because he was preaching Islam, no. Rather, he was using certain examples, that of his most precious asset, his son who had passed in Iraq, to try to teach at least one of the candidates that the idea of religion was not something that should be debated and bandied about in a presidential election as a hot topic issue. They were using, and in fact, I would say abusing, the Islamic community, and it took someone who gave a very bold statement saying, forget everything, just look at your Constitution and see what it is that you, as a potential president, are supposed to uphold before you start taking shots or blaming others given the circumstances. I think in that circumstance, and what we've seen, some of the rhetoric over the last year, people are using religion to try to score points. Right. Conversely, our communities are trying to use religion to heal, to direct, to guide, and to bring people together. The use of religion in what we're seeing in this year's election, unfortunately for some of the candidates, is incredibly opposite. And for that, you're seeing some of the unfortunate circumstances, whether it's targeted killings down south, whether it's imams being murdered on the streets of New York just a few days ago. Those are some of the things we're seeing as a result of some of that anti-religious, or even I would say anti-Islamic rhetoric.
I would have to imagine that all of you are going to have differing perspectives on this, but in what ways, looking at the landscape right now with the presidential election, how are you seeing, and you just pointed to one aspect, how are you seeing religion in particular impacting or influencing this election cycle? Imani, you're smiling.
I don't want to take that one first. Unfortunately, I think that many times what happens within this election season has been that people are using their personal viewpoints versus religion and what religion is trying to teach to get their message across. That's not good or bad. I'm not judging it. But I do think that what ends up happening is that what you're hearing is dissatisfaction with their personal situation versus what is really going on and being taught from the pews.
And at the same time, all of our traditions represent a wealth of information, a wealth of experiences, a wealth of teaching that is oversimplified in the media, in conversation, whether it be between individuals or across the media platforms that we have, that really just does not do religion or religious teaching justice. And I think that's fair for all of us.
Yes.
Sure. I would see something maybe a little more pointed about what is happening in this election, and that is there's been injected into this election cycle, into the conversation, an incredible amount of anti-Muslim sentiment and an incredible amount of anti-Semitism. And those, unfortunately, have become what I think is really a tragic part of the conversation in this election. And now we can't escape it. We have to address it. We have to say and demonstrate with our words and with our actions that that's not an acceptable part of the dialogue that should take place when considering who should be the elected leader of our country.
How do you respond to that with as leaders, as voices of varied religious backgrounds in this community? How do you address something like that, considering things such as, Donald Trump saying there should be a total, complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States? He could say that, a candidate could say that about any religious group. So what type of obligation do you feel to counteract that, to address it?
What we've done is merely informed our congregants, and we're very apolitical, as with all congregations. I'm sure there are people from all spectrums, but all we've told them was just make an informed decision. We don't practice politics in the Islamic Center. We never have, and we will not. Everybody gets a voice, everybody gets a patient hearing, and then you're going to go into the ballot box, and you're going to go into the booth, and you're going to decide. And we've told people, just think, whether it's from one side or the other, you have to educate yourself. You have to see who is good for you and your family. You have to see who's good for your community and who's good for your country. Because the idea that's being propagated is that a Muslim and being an American, that they somehow are not congruent. And the fact of the matter is that as a Muslim and as an American, I cannot imagine any other things being as common to me as those two. It is the most consistent thing for me because my religion teaches certain things, my country teaches certain things. And I cannot think that there is any conflict between the two. And I think that's the same for everybody. It's a matter of what is best for you and your teachings. And the things that we see in our teachings guide us to be educated, to make an intelligent choice, and like we say, leave the rest to God.
Archbishop Chaput down in Philadelphia recently wrote a personal essay in his diocesan newspaper inviting people to the same kind of thing in the Catholic community. The U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops produces a document called Forming Consciences for faithful citizenship every election cycle. And interesting, I thought, was the Archbishop also identified that he finds this election cycle both depressing and liberating. And I found that quite interesting. Depressing, of course, we all know that. And I think we can all feel that in terms of the rhetoric, in terms of the policy, in terms of the attitudes that are out there. And it's just polarizing everybody. But liberating, in the sense of that, I found very insightful, and I think a topic for this discussion here, is it brings people together beyond the tribalism that usually exists with parties. So it's calling people to a greater good. Say, let's set aside party ideologies. We need to talk on a really human level with one another that begins with a respect and an understanding that we're all in this together. We're all seeking a common good. We're trying to build a better society, beginning with the poor, the neglected, the forgotten, and one another as brothers and sisters in the community. We all benefit from that. He ends up with a wonderful reflection. He says, that calls us all to a deeper silence, to set aside all the noise, and that silence is where prayer is born. And I thought it was an excellent article, actually.
What we're seeing, the Muslim community still by and large is still very heavily an immigrant community. And I'm seeing articles now of whether they were refugees or merely people who were coming and having just green cards and coming through the system. They are embracing citizenship. And why? Because they're waking up to the fact that finally they have a voice that matters, that will be heard. one ballot, one vote is their mantra now. And they see that whoever is good for me in my community, I can exercise my franchise. I have the ability to influence something that historically I didn't have the chance. That is the bedrock of America. And the ability to come, put in your time, go through the system, accept the citizenship, and then the next day you are as good as somebody who's been here for 50 years, and you get to have your voice heard. Those are the things that we're seeing in our communities because people realize if they don't, nobody's going to hear them.
One thing I wanted to pose to all of you, I wanted to get your thoughts, perspectives on this. How is it that religion can play a key role in certain topics that often get brought up in presidential elections, such as abortion and the treatment of gay, lesbian, and transgender people, but not on other things so much? So things such as gun policy, terrorism, and immigration, those last three all rank at the top of the list when it comes to the main voting issues for this election year. Why do you think some things make the cut, so to speak, but not other things so much in terms of religion playing a role?
I think it may be more a matter of the visibility of certain issues rather than activity actually taking place within the religious community. In the Jewish community in particular, there's been a major gun violence initiative taking place over the last several months, last year or so, which is very definitely playing into the election cycle, into the debates and discussions. It's just not quite as visible as some of the other issues that you posed, the pro-choice movement, for example.
I oftentimes think, too, though, in American mindset, and especially in a political arena, we think because something's been voted on, therefore the issue's settled. So the issue continues to percolate with people for a variety of different reasons, and I think the issues that you mentioned are continuing to be unsettled for some people. In the Catholic community in particular, where we value life in all forms and trying to maintain the dignity of life, that's just going to be a value we maintain and hold and promote at every turn and corner. Does it mean that we don't respect one another? Does it mean that we castigate one another or demean other people? I don't think so. I think the other issues are, I would probably argue, are probably not as politically, in the media. I don't want to blame the media, but I think the media shortchanges the discussions on those other issues, whether it be gun control or immigration. So certainly those issues are very important.
We have to close for now, but great conversation, great guests. Thank you for your time today and for also weighing in on this topic. Be sure to set your DVR for Frontline's acclaimed election series, The Choice 2016, which returns on September 27th for a 2-hour program going beyond the headlines to examine the formative moments in the lives of presidential candidates Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. That's Tuesday, September 27th at 9 p.m. right here on WXXI TV. It's a rather simple equation. Soul plus groove equals Danielle Ponder and the Tomorrow People. The local group has performed throughout Europe and around the U.S., winning over audiences and the Best Local Band Award from the 2015 Rock Awards. But the meaning behind the songs, written by Rochester native and vocalist for the band, Danielle Ponder, are anything but simple and surface level. It was the online music source Soul Tracks that called Ponder's vocals a combination of the spirit of the church with the speak truth to power assertiveness of a movement leader. Joining me now to share more about her story, her band, and the influence of her work as a public defender on her music is Danielle Ponder of Danielle Ponder and the Tomorrow People. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I have to be honest with you, there's been a lot of excitement and anticipation around WXXI this week when they found out that you were coming. People said, Danielle Ponder, I can't wait to see her. And it's true, your voice blows people away, your stage presence blows people away, and also your career story is so intriguing. You live this life of a vocalist, music producer, singer-songwriter, and then also a criminal defense attorney.
Yes.
So how does a public defender simultaneously live the life of a singer-songwriter? How did it evolve?
You know what? I've always been I've been singing and performing for about 10 years. So actually, the public defender part came later. But I always was involved in the activist community. Before I was a public defender, I was a community organizing, and I really went to law school because I was really interested in criminal justice and criminal justice policy reform. So I never thought I couldn't do both. You know, singing is just something I do. It's just like breathing. It's gonna happen whether I'm a doctor or whether I'm whatever. It's just, I'm gonna do it. But I also really believe in not just singing about injustices, but for me, I also have to work and you know, work in the community, and being a public defender is one of those ways that I get to do that. So
that's how these two hats that you wear kind of intersect.
yes.
So has there ever been a case that you've worked on, or a story that's really touched your heart, that's found its way into one of your songs?
So I have a song called Criminalized that it's not a specific story, but it really is the experience of a lot of my young clients, male clients of color. So the song is dedicated to young black boys and their interactions with the police and the community. And it's something I see every day in my job, whether it's kids who are riding their bike in the city and they're stopped because they don't have a bell on their bike, which we all know is not happening in East Avenue and Park Avenue. I don't even have a bell on my bike, but or you know, I had a client last year who was stopped because he failed to use the sidewalk. So these types of basically racial profiling that I see in court, that was something I decided to write about in the song Criminalized. So that's one song where there's a connection that's been made. Yes.
Well, we have a clip of your video for the song We Live, so viewers can check it out.
Awesome.
We'll watch right now.
How you let me sneak up on you like that? We're talking revolution. Oh yeah, but all those folks ignore. Said it ain't gonna be so funny. Oh yeah, and we knocking on your front door. Come on, come on, come on. We live hand in mouth. We live fighting, crawling. We hold truth and love, and we live hope and praying. We live hand in mouth. We live fighting, crawling. We hold truth and love.
So one line of We Live reads, "One day we're going to rise up, children of the sun unite, speaking truth to power, sure we're going to put up a hell of a fight." And this is a song about surviving through struggles.
yeah.
And recently, I need to know, we had a discussion with area filmmakers, and we talked about the power of documentaries and the ways in which some nonfiction films can really be used as a tool for change and a tool for social justice. When I hear songs like We Live, Criminalize, I can't help but wonder if the same can be true for music.
Yes, absolutely. I think that to me, the stage is a sacred place, and it's a healing space. Not only healing myself, but hoping to heal people in the audience. And We Live is really dedicated to the Black community. I think there's other people who can take that message and there's a lesson from that message. But when I initially wrote it, it was really to encourage us that, you know, we are still here, we're still surviving. So as long as we are still alive, there's still the ability to overcome the things that we face in our community. And I think, you know, racism is something that is painful, and it's something that's hurtful, and I think people don't understand that. And so to be able to sing about it is a therapy. It's a therapy for myself. It's a therapy for many people of color in the audience, just like singing, you know, about a breakup. So definitely music can be very healing and restorative for people.
How do you decide which issues of the day? Because there are a number of issues when it comes to inequality in our society. How do you decide the ones to tackle through music?
I don't think I sit and, think about it that, I don't sit and think of all the issues and say, oh, what am I gonna write about? I really believe that songs just come to you. Sometimes it is an experience. I wrote a song recently called Something Funky. And
Something funky.
I wrote this song because I'm noticing and I'm appreciating what I will call as people defying gender norms. So I have friends on my Facebook page who are men who wear makeup or wear skirts, or they're girls, or they're part of the LGBT community, or whatever it might be. And the more I see that, the more I think we're being taught a lesson in personal liberation, right? I think the trans movement is teaching everyone something about personal liberation. And if we get so caught up into judging people, we're not getting the lessons for ourselves. And for me, that lesson is, if this person can face so many adversities by coming out as trans or transitioning, and still say, this is what I'm gonna wear and this is what I'm gonna do, then I can get my life together and I can do what I wanna do and I can feel free. So that song, Something Funky, was inspired just thinking about that one day, how powerful and fearless people in the trans community are. And that's what we need to take away. That's what we should take away as people, is to be fearless and to be powerful.
Well, you're the child of a preacher. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious as to whether that PK title, Preacher's Kid label, influences your music at all, influences your performances at all, because you clearly know how to own the stage.
Yeah. I think it does. I would probably have not admitted it before because, I was always like, I don't want to go to church. I don't want to be a gospel singer, never. And then I get on stage and I'm literally in church. Yeah. So my mom has basically said to me, you're a preacher. But definitely seeing my father get on stage, get in the pulpit, and pretty much tell a story and move people. And my mom also preaches as well. So to have both parents on stage moving people through their message, that is, I inherited that definitely from my parents. So I have to thank the church for giving me that ability to connect. And that's where I was introduced to passion, was in the church as a young girl. When you see people shouting and you see them running around the building and you see your father in the pulpit jumping back and forth, that was passion and that was a connection to God. So.
Well, Danielle Ponder, attorney and singer-songwriter, thank you for joining me today. Danielle Ponder and the Tomorrow People are performing at the Little Theater on Friday, September 9th at 8 p.m. for the Little Theater Concert Series. Doors open at 7 and tickets are on sale right now. Just go to thelittle.org. And that's it for this edition of Need to Know, Rochester's news magazine. I'm your host, Helen Bianduti Hofer. Thank you for joining me. And if you ever miss a broadcast, catch us online at WXXInews.org. Just click on the Need to Know link. I'll see you next week.